Hello everyone, Anna from SavvyCat Realty here today to speak about daily life customs in Portugal and some of the things that my clients have found weird from their perspective. Do keep in mind that a lot of my clients are American, so a lot of the things I will be talking about are culture clashes mainly for America, but they will be applying to other countries as well, and I would be very happy to see your comments and your feedback on the things that you found strange when you came here to Portugal, or even the things that are strange in your country, because I find these things so fascinating. So many of them, I didn't even consider that was a strange thing until my clients and foreigners told me, really, we don't do that, and I'm like, So let's talk about some of these things. And just before we start, for those of you who don't know, SavvyCat Realty is a relocation and investment agency. We help our clients in the whole process of moving to Portugal, from getting their visas to choosing the location to live in, choosing the neighborhood, fitting in, getting property, be it rental or purchase, and we support them in the whole way to getting settled here in the best way possible. So that's the goal of my company, is to get people to start their new life in Portugal in the best way that we all can. So going into today's topic, that is the daily life customs of Portugal. One of the things that mostly my American clients completely go nuts about is bread. So we have very good bread here in Portugal, and I confess I've been traveling mostly to Europe and I haven't left Europe that much. So I don't know about America, but I can compare to Spain. And I can definitely say that I prefer 10 times the bread in Portugal. However, for example, in France, they do have very good bread too. In Britain, I think they have some interesting things and some others not, but there's more variety. But here in Portugal, bread is a thing. Breakfasts are a thing. Like, in the north especially, and that's also an interesting cultural thing from the south to the north, is that in the north it is very typical for people to go out for breakfast, and we'll see the bakeries full of people in the morning that are taking their breakfast at the morning with their pastries or bread, and usually coffee. I'm not a coffee person, but our coffee is also great. So we have the espresso coffee, and everyone says wonders about it, but as I'm not a coffee appreciator, I can't speak for myself. For the bread, on the other hand, I definitely can. So one of my favorite types of bread here in Portugal is the typical bread from Alentejo and Algarve. You know, they have these big loaves that are kind of round and do like this. And, oh, they are so tasty. Back when I was living in the Algarve, I had this typical bakery just in front of my house, and I would go there every morning to get a fresh loaf of bread, and while it was warm with butter, it's just the most amazing thing. So, okay, I'm getting everyone hungry, but also the other thing that everyone is usually very surprised about is that bread is extremely cheap here. So that these loaves of bread, like this size, the small ones are like this size, they will be like €1.80. Then you have the big ones that are more like this, that are more like €2. Some of the expensive ones are €3, but they will be big loaves of bread. So bread is pretty expensive and very good. So one of the first interesting things about the daily life in Portugal. Another thing that a lot of my clients mention is groceries. Groceries are very cheap, and we have quite a lot of fresh produce markets around the different cities. Most of the cities will have one, and you will be able to buy both fresh fish and fresh vegetables. There's usually separate markets, or at least separate areas for the vegetables and the fish. And once again, things are very, very cheap. So usually fruit is between 60 and €1, €1.50 per kilo. And fish is of course more expensive and depends on the type of fish, as I'm someone that usually eats big fish like salmon and tuna, and I don't know the names of the rest of them in English, but the kinds of fishes. Those are usually more expensive, and those are usually between 10 and 20 euros a kilo. Some of them go up to 25. Of course, the ones that are sea caught are more expensive, and the ones that you buy in the supermarket are usually from aquaculture, like everywhere else, I guess. But another thing is that in general, our vegetables and fruits tend to be quite tasty. As someone that grew up in a farm, or partially in a farm, and I still had the experience of, you know, climbing up the trees to get the fruits and eat straight from the tree and so on. I'm very, very picky with fruits and vegetables because I'm used to the best kind. And sometimes the ones you find in the supermarket aren't great, but usually you find really, really good things on the fresh produce markets, and those really are the thing. So this is another very positive aspect of the life in Portugal. So now the next thing is actually a warning. So as most of you know, Portugal is not a part of Spain, as most neighboring countries, there is quite a rivalry between the countries. So if you are not a native Spanish speaker, do not come to Portugal and speak Spanish, because people will hate you. Like, don't do that, seriously. Speak English, speak any other language, do not speak Spanish unless you are a native Spanish speaker, because people will really rub it the wrong way and they will dislike you a lot for doing that. So that will save you a lot of trouble. So the next interesting thing that happens is that in Portugal you have a lot of roundabouts. Like every 10 kilometers, even less than that, maybe sometimes every 2 kilometers, you will find a roundabout. And I know that in America, roundabouts are not the most common thing, and here you will be stumbling on one every 5 minutes. And they are quite practical, but you do need to know how to circulate on them. So the standard is that if you want to go out on the first exit, so the first exit is the one to the right, because you contour like this for, well, the video is inverted, so you will see it inverted. But you will contour it from the counterclockwise, and the first exit is the one to the right, and if you leave on the first exit, you go on the outer strip of the roundabout, and if you leave on the second, third, or so on, you go on the inner one, and then go to the outer strip when you want to leave the roundabout. So that's the standard practice on roundabouts. And staying on the topic of driving, Portuguese people really don't like to drive a lot. On top of that, you know, fuel is expensive, so we are cheap and we don't want to spend fuel. But one of the things that really confused me when I started working with Americans a lot is that people telling me, oh, I used to drive 3 hours to work, and like, that's outrageous for us. If you are driving more than 20 minutes to work here, people are like, I'm not doing that. No one is going to choose to live in a place that is more than the 20 minutes, maybe 30 if you're pushing it because of the rents of the place they are working. We just don't do that. If you do more, like 50 minutes is ideal. We don't want to drive long distances all the time. So that is something else that you will find a lot. Is another curious thing is that sometimes I have clients, they say, oh, I want to be close to Lisbon, but they want to go to Nazaré. Nazaré is like more than an hour for Lisbon, and for me that's not close to Lisbon at all, and it's not realistic to go to Lisbon on a daily basis because fuel is expensive and highway fees, tolls are expensive. So if you want to go to a city on a daily basis in Portugal, don't stay in more than half an hour distance from that city. Of course, that's not counting traffic, and traffic sucks, especially in Lisbon. But yeah, Portuguese thing, we don't like driving every day a lot. Another thing that goes back to the costs of living is the cost of services. The services here in Portugal are fairly cheap. So you will have a hairdresser and so on. Usually male hairdressers are really cheap. Like for male cuts, it usually starts from 10 euros or something. I'm suspicious with my very long hair because I spend a lot of money when I go to the hairdresser because I have a very long hair. But that being said, it usually is between 90 and 160. Depending on how much work I'm doing, and by work I mean discolorating, cutting, painting, dyeing, and doing all of those things. So I pretty much spend a day at the hairdresser when I spend 160 euros, so I don't think it's that expensive. But then again, I usually don't really go to the cheap ones either. There's probably cheaper ones, but I really value keeping my hair intact. So this is just an example. There's other things. I just used this one as a practical one. Another thing that people really enjoy about Portugal is the warmness and receptiveness of people. This of course will change a bit from location to location. Maybe you won't feel it as much as locations like Lisbon, where there's much more of a city mindset and people are minding their own business and have a fairly fast-paced life and don't concern that much with others. However, in locations that are more interior and smaller locations and so on, you have a very warm type of welcoming to foreigners and to everyone really. So I've had a lot of cases of clients that settled in not so big cities that ended up, knowing their neighbors, and they come even bring gift baskets. I had a really cute case where the lady didn't know how to speak English, and she left a basket for my clients that just purchased a house earlier. And then her son came later on to explain in English what the basket was about. So that was really cute. And we've had a few situations like that. And I know that in many countries there is no longer this kind of culture, and here you still find it a lot, which is really, really nice. And that is also related to the more slow-paced life that we have here in Portugal, which does have its pros and cons, like everything. Because the slow-paced life means, people are usually less stressed, and if we are comfortable, we will just be enjoying the things that we have, and people go a lot out of their own way to help others. For example, when someone is lost, to give directions. In Portugal, it's completely common for someone to walk 20 minutes, half an hour out of their way to just drop that person in where they have to be and walk back. Like many people will do that. And same thing applies for lost and found and so on. Even I know of a lot of cases, and it has happened to me, where people just forget their bags or something somewhere, the train, a store, whatever. And 90% of the cases it will be returned with everything that was inside, and people will often get out of their ways to get it returned. So that warmness of honesty, I guess, it's definitely a very positive side of things. Then the bad side of all of this is, of course, that the services tend to be very, very slow. So I know America is extremely fast-paced and everyone is used to getting an answer in like hours. That is very much not Portuguese. Like, even when I started realizing that my American clients would completely freak out if I didn't answer them in like 48 hours, that is completely out of the norm here. For here, it's no one freaks out if someone doesn't answer you for a week. Only after a week you start freaking out. So, yeah, slow-paced life, I guess. The downside of this is that we are very, very used to services taking a long time, including, of course, the best example of this is public services. Public services will drive you crazy, and they will reply to you in a month if you're lucky. So, those take them to extremes. Another thing that a lot of my clients talk about is the unity of families and respect for elders. So this is one of those things that I never really realized, because for us it's so normal. But yeah, we usually go out of our ways to spend some time with family, and we'll have our family reunions quite a few times a year. And especially with our elder relatives, when we know they are getting unwell, everyone in the family usually makes an effort to spend time with them, because we know they probably won't be staying with us for a lot longer. And apparently that's not a completely standard thing. So that is pretty much a standard thing here in Portugal. And in that line, it's also interesting how Portuguese people kind of mixed family with business and personal with business. When I started dealing with foreign clients, you know, for us it's extremely normal to just go out for a dinner, like it was a dinner with friends, with business acquaintances, like someone we are working with, and, you know, have a normal dinner where we discuss fun things in our life and then deal with business at the end. And this would be so strange for many of my clients. Like, I had this Canadian client, and we were doing a renovation for her, and we had to go through the whole process with the contractor engineer that was going to be in charge of it. And she would, we would go and we would have dinner, and you're like, okay, let's have lunch and discuss this. And she would be like, okay, but we're not discussing business. Yeah, no, don't worry. We will, but it's just at the end. Right now, it's about enjoying the food and having a good time. So that's very much a Portuguese posture. And if you go straight into business and talk all business in a business meal, people won't like you very much. It's perfectly normal to do the pleasantries and, you know, have some fun, enjoy the food, and do the business in the end. That's very much the way we do it here. Something I just remembered today is about dryers and line drying. So machine dryers, where you dry your clothing, weren't a thing until, like, I don't know, 10 years ago, when the automatic laundry thing started appearing. I know that the first time I saw one was on an automatic laundry thing, and they started becoming available as a private home appliance probably around that time, but honestly 90% of the population doesn't have one. And most of people do line drying, but basically no one uses a drying machine. Everyone pretty much does line drying. But now that I started using a drying machine, they are quite practical, but it pretty much depends on the weather and where the kind of conditions you have in the house. Like most of the houses that I have, we have a patio or an outside space that is considerable, so it is quite easy to do the line drying. But in locations like, for example, here in Caldas, where the weather isn't great all the time, and I actually don't have a nice outside space, it's really impractical not to have a dryer. However, the standard practice in Portugal is not having a dryer. So you will often also see, the clothes hanging on the windows and all of those kinds of things. And that's just the way we do it here. And as for the last topic of today's video about daily life customs in Portugal, is dating. So dating here in Portugal is, works very differently. I remember back when I was in college and we would have Erasmus students, and they would be so confused about how dating would work, because we don't really do formal dating. At least it started being a thing with the cultural globalization and with the newer generations. But my generation and older generation, we don't really ask people on a date. You pretty much just get to know people on outings with friends and go out with them. You don't really tell them it's a formal date, or probably they will freak out. So the whole dating thing, it's kind of not a thing. It's just started being a thing now with the younger generations, like I was saying, but it was so confusing for the Erasmus students. I remember that we had this Erasmus, I don't remember what his nationality was, but he was really into one of my friends, and he would come to us super confused, like, I want to ask her out, but I said, okay, I want to take you on a date. And she would just push me away and say, we don't do that, I don't want to go on a date. And it was just this game of cat and mouse, because if he didn't tell her that he wanted to go on a date, she wouldn't have freaked out in the first place, and she would probably go out for dinner with him with no issue at all if he didn't have labeled it as date. But yeah, it's pretty much a label thing. I remember the situation was hilarious, and even on dating apps and so on, you will not find a lot of people from my generation and above, I guess. You do, of course, find on the big cities and so on, there's more people, but there is still not a lot of adherence, I guess, to the formal dating culture. And that can be a bit confusing if you're coming to Portugal as a single person and looking for a partner. Yeah, know that you will likely face that difficulty. People really don't like labels here. So just ask people to go for dinner or a coffee and don't label it as a date, and it will probably work out. So just to review the topics we discussed today, we discussed the bread and breakfast here in Portugal, the groceries, the don't speak Spanish warning, the driving distances and roundabouts, cost of services, warmness of people, the slow-paced life, the unity of family, the mix of business and relaxation, line drying versus drying machine, and foot last, dating. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. I would be very, very happy to hear your feedback and hear your own cultural clashes and daily life peculiarities of your own culture, or the things that you found really interesting here in Portugal. And for us to close, for those of you who don't know, Savvy Cat Realty is a relocation agency that helps expats come to Portugal and supports in everything from the visa to getting settled and purchasing or renting a place. We do have a website. It is www.savvycatrealty.com. We share a lot of information there. We have a blog, and we always try to be as helpful as possible. Always subscribe to my YouTube channel if you find this information useful. We send weekly. We update videos weekly. And of course, we also have a weekly newsletter. So feel free to follow us whenever you feel it's more convenient for you. And I will be seeing you again next week. Have a great time. Bye.